Welcome to Coast View, the show that every single day celebrates the men and women who are making coastal Mississippi such a great place to live, work, and play. We've got a great show today. We're going to talk about the Blowfly Inn, but before we do that, I have a quote to share. And I also want to thank you for engaging with Coast View. As I mentioned last week, the number of impressions that we've grown to just at the just at the Ricky Matthews Coast View page. This is not counting Super Talk Gulf Coast or Super Talk Mississippi, where Super Talk Mississippi incidentally has hundreds of thousands of impressions. But we've hit over the 70,000 mark, which is incredible, really, for a show like Coast View. And you add it to the other extensions of this show across YouTube and the other Facebook channels, and of course the podcast, and not counting the number of listeners, so many of you paying attention to Super Talk Gulf Coast and listening to this show. You know, one of the things that we sought out to do was create a show that you can trust, that celebrates coastal Mississippi in a way that's interesting. And we've been very committed to that and have a growing number of listeners. And we want to just thank you for engaging with us. It's exciting. It's exciting to be across a bunch of different platforms. And the more people who pay attention, the more who can engage in this celebration and can learn really from the stories of so many incredible people that we talk to. One of those is the conversation we're about to have in just a second. My friend Calvin Issue from Pasquasham posted something the other day that really caught my attention. And it's really true. As a publisher, even on the show from time to time, when I get engaged in issues, there's a lot about this that I can relate to. And here's what it says. Sometimes you face difficulties, not because you're doing something wrong, but because you're doing something right. You know, whether you're talking about taking a position when maybe others don't agree with you, maybe it's a career choice. It's hard. Maybe you just decide to do something that's going to have tremendous payback, but it's not going to be easy. The point between where you are now and where you're going is not an easy road. It could be, doing things. We talk about this a lot, but being focused on surrounding yourself with positive people who can have great influence on you, and kind of taking the negativity out of your life. It's one thing to say that. It's another thing to actually do it. And to actually move to take negative people out of your life can be really difficult, but the outcome can be really good. You might be, we talk a lot on this show about health and living a healthy lifestyle. But listen, I'll be the first to tell you that making decisions to live a healthy life mean that oftentimes you got to make difficult decisions. And so those choices are important, but they're part of that goal. So again, it's not easy. It could be making a business decision that's ultimately good for the community. And sometimes those are hard decisions to make, but the outcomes can be so beneficial from a business perspective and to the community that it's worth it. And so there are a lot of people that I talk to on this show who know this. Sometimes you face difficulties not because you're doing something wrong, but because you're doing something right. That is for sure. And someone who can really, I think, relate to that is my next guest, Jonathan Allen. You know him from J. Allen Automotive. He's been on the show a number of times. He's a good friend to Coast View. He's a good friend of mine. And he did something recently that is incredibly impressive, and that is that he's gone on a mission to bring back an important, truly iconic restaurant in Gulfport, the Blowfly Inn. And we're going to talk about that now. So, Jonathan, how you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great, Ricky. As always, thanks for having me on your show. It's always a blast to talk with you.
Yeah, I enjoy spending time with you. Sometimes you face difficulties not because you're doing something wrong, but because you're doing something right. You know that. I mean, as a business leader, as someone who has to make tough choices, you know that quote better than most, don't you?
Absolutely. Growth only happens through discomfort. If you don't go through some discomfort, you're really not experiencing anything new. So there's really no learning opportunity, which means growth can't happen. I fully am in on that one, Ricky.
I know you are. And as we were chatting before the show started, I really admire what you've done with this landmark, iconic restaurant, the Blowfly Inn, and we're going to talk about that here in just a second. But not only do you have J. Allen Automotive, but you have All Terrain Productions. You actually invested before in a restaurant bar over in Bay St. Louis, and you and I have talked about that before. So the Blowfly Inn is actually not your first foray into this arena, but it is probably the first, in this way, where you've taken this iconic restaurant. And you've tried to stay true to the roots of what the Blowfly Inn, and we'll for people who are not familiar with the Blowfly Inn, we'll talk about that in just a second. But it's been a hell of a journey for you, hasn't it?
Yes, and an unexpected one too. That just, you never know when opportunity is going to strike. And the previous owner, I just had a good interaction with him, and he actually asked me about my place in Bay St. Louis, and I asked him about the Blowfly, and that prompted the conversation that ultimately allowed us to put a deal together, and him divest of it and me invest in it, and here we are.
So let's tell a little bit of the history. One of the just going to give it to you from my perspective. I was sort of raised at the Sun Herald. I worked there for 27 years, was publisher and president of the company along the way. It was interesting when people would come to town to do business with us. It could be corporate folks, it could be vendors that we're doing business with. They had a tendency, when the Blowfly was in its heyday, people sort of knew about the Blowfly Inn, and they would come in and say, "What is this thing called the Blowfly? What can we go eat there?" And of course, once we went there, they would come back into town, a year later and say, "Man, let's go back to the Blowfly." They want to go back to the Blowfly. They enjoyed the experience. They enjoyed getting the little plastic fly. I know it's kind of gimmicky, but it's part of sort of the story. But I just remember good food, and then we had these sort of turbulent transitions. New owners, or certainly new managers. They tried to get away from some of the roots of the menu that made Blowfly so special, some of the environment that made Blowfly so special. And one of the things that you've done is bring all that back. You've tried to stay really true to sort of the authenticity of the Blowfly Inn and bring that back. But also at the same time, obviously, investing heavily on the environment and making sure that it's sort of upgraded a little bit. So let's start with some of the history from your perspective.
Okay, so yeah, I go back to the Blowfly as a child myself, as so many people in the area have. I went there as a kid when the pre-Katrina building that was basically a house that had an outdoor screened-in patio with a dirt floor that you could sit on picnic tables out there and eat. And I remember the cheeseburgers as a kid. I do remember eating racks of ribs there, which we don't offer ribs just yet, but we will. And that's one of those things that. I've got a bunch of interesting stories about the Blowfly. I can remember the jukebox and learning and playing Boot Scoot and Boogie on it every time I went in there, and Friends in Low Places. And one interesting story I have about the Blowfly that really is a thing for me. My parents were going to eat there when we were younger, and we were old enough to not need babysitters, but we were just young enough to still be able to stay at home. But my brother and I were playing basketball, and like the older brother and the younger brother typically do, I was dominating, and I thought I hurt his wrist, and I thought I had broken his wrist, and I rode my bike to the Blowfly to go tell them that I think I hurt my brother's wrist, and I ended up kind of sitting down and finishing the meal with them and putting my bike in the back of the truck and riding back with them. But it's a memory I'll never forget, because I could ride my bike there and basically tattle on myself, but I wanted to make sure he was okay. But yeah, just an interesting story.
Well, you had, because of your personal experience with it, you sort of understood that when you say iconic, it really was an iconic restaurant. If people had their memories and their celebrations, their enjoyment of the food, the fact that it's on the bayou in this kind of unique place. Everyone's got a similar story. And when you look at sort of now the social media posts around it, as you've been sharing this journey with people, you can tell everyone has their connection to it. And they're a little disappointed that during all these transitions and openings and closings, that it kind of lost its soul in a way. And what you're trying to do is bring that back again. And that's clear, isn't it?
That's right. And our primary focus, even though we've done so much to the building, has been the food. 100% the food. We finished the deal in September. We started construction almost immediately after. foolishly made a comment on the news that we would be opening mid-November with renovations complete. And but then we found out what the building really needed, and I got asked the right question by the right contractors. Are you trying to get this place back open? Or are you trying to solidify it for the next 20 years? And it was easy answer for me to say the next 20 years is what I want to do. I want to make this building not need anything, and let us not have to worry about anything but making good food and taking care of the customers. So we went about creating the environment, and most of the design, actually all of the design was my vision, and we didn't have an interior designer, and I picked out lighting and those kinds of things. But I had so much good local help in the contracting and all that. The biggest mission was the food.
Yeah, well, let's do this, Jonathan. As we continue this conversation with Jonathan Allen on the other side, we'll talk about the pretty significant renovations he did to kind of keep the atmosphere clean and casual, and something that could stand the test of time. When we come back, we'll continue the conversation. Welcome back to Coast View. I have my friend Jonathan Allen. You know him from J. Allen Automotive, but he also owns, or part owner, and in some cases, complete owner of restaurants here in Coastal Mississippi. And one is the Blowfly Inn, and we're talking about this resurrection of this iconic restaurant that is trying desperately not to reconnect actually to the roots of this amazing place, this very special restaurant. And when we went to break, we were talking about how he sort of naively said they would open up in November of last year, but then came to the realization that some of the bones and infrastructure of the building needed to be upgraded and so on. And he brought his own sort of eye for interior decoration to keep that, what was really part of the restaurant theme, this like clean, open air environment. And, you know, to look at the bar now and look at, you actually posted a photo of sitting on the edge of the bar, looking outside. It sort of reminded me actually of a big boat. If you were to be looking out the front of a boat,
Absolutely.
It's just a cool, it's got so many nice little additions to it that make it slightly better, and in some cases maybe significantly better than it was before. Talk a little bit about some of those changes.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. So there's huge changes in the facility itself. There used to be a false ceiling that was about 8 feet off the floor. We went up to the pitch of the roof and put architectural beams and wood and put a metal roof up there, and it just really draws your eye up and adds different form of lighting to it without being overwhelming. And we took the bar that was a little right angle in the very corner and went all the way across the back side of the bar. And the seat you were talking about, I could call that the helm seat, because I think it's the best seat in the house because you've got such a wonderful view. We were able to clear the kind of scrub brush next door, which really opened the view up from the corner all the way around. And that's another thing is the inside is very comfortable and clean and nice, but we wanted to accent the view. And the view is what you get 180 degrees inside the restaurant, and every table can capitalize on that view. We did a lot of high tops in the restaurant, so you can do that. But we also know that we needed some low tops too to take care of our younger customers and our older customers.
Yeah, that's really exciting. Clean. I think the thing that I noticed most about the pictures was that when I say open air, I really do mean that. I love when you have, bare ceilings, and that the pitch of the roof is high, and it gives you sort of a more grand feeling, but you haven't lost the casual atmosphere at all. It's still, that's the hallmark from the Blowfly Inn is a casual, wonderful atmosphere to be able to eat in.
Yes. That was the next steps would have been white linen and place settings and all that. It is. It's just enough without being too much, and it's a nice, clean environment while still being comfortable without feeling stuffy. We think the price ranges are right in that comfort zone for that style of restaurant. And another thing I wanted to mention was the floors. It's a concrete floor, stained and formed to look like an antique wood floor. And when you first walk in, it looks like an antique wood floor. They did a phenomenal job on the floor, and it's a concrete floor. So, I love when you have raised buildings like that, when you have a concrete floor, because oftentimes they don't. Mm-hmm. And what happens is you end up walking across, and it's kind of a hollow, kind of a loud feel to it. That actually helps with the acoustics in the building to some extent, doesn't it? Well, yes, but the pitch of the roof and putting the metal paneling on the roof like we did, that's my only complaint I've had. I've had no complaints about the food, no complaints really about anything. We've only been serving food for about a week now. I think when this airs, we'll have started our dinner service, which will start on March 1st, Wednesday. But the acoustics of the place are a little noisy, and we're already looking into acoustical paneling to minimize some of that noise right when you're in the middle of the building. It can get a little noisy. You can hear your table fine, but just the ambient noise is, and we've got a good stereo in there too. It's playing some good music.
I'm sure it is, because I know you like music.
I do.
Hey, so let's talk about the food, because that, to me, at the end of the day, bringing back the old menu that literally stood the test of time while making a few adjustments here and there. That's going to be the key to the success of this. You've got to hit it out of the park there. Yes. And so far, so good as it relates to that, isn't it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I had some really great kind of advisors on how to handle this properly. Talked with Scott Weinberg, and I would say he ran the last successful blowfly, in my opinion. And it was some of the food that we kept, not most of the food that we kept, was either throwing homage to it or exactly the recipes that they were. The whole stuffed flounder, the she crab soup. Like I said, ribs is one thing that's a staple for me going way back when, that we're not offering just yet, but we will. A great cheeseburger. Our ground beef is never frozen, and it is just, there's just these basic things that the blowfly always did right that we will always do right. Another thing that I heard from people repetitively was that the dessert cooler, when you walk up and you could pick from all these desserts. Well, we've got a fantastic bakery style chef also in the kitchen, and she makes some amazing stuff, and it's there, and you can go pick from a choice of about 5 or 6 desserts on a daily basis, along with the staple banana pudding too, by the way. I have to say that.
Of course. Yeah. I remember the salads. I remember the steaks. Steaks were good. That
was another one. We wanted to offer a ribeye, a filet, and maybe a porterhouse or something like that, and Scott said, you have to do a T-bone. You have to. He said, I tried to offer a porterhouse one time, and everybody kept saying, where's the T-bone? So we have a filet, ribeye, and a T-bone.
And I'm sure they're going to be terrific. One of the things that you and I talked about before we started on the air was there's this growing trend to want to access restaurants like the Blowfly Inn from the water. You just see that. That's just it's a thing now. People want to eat by water. And you've taken some steps, and you plan to take actually more steps in that arena to make it so that people can get there by boat.
Yeah. So what we've already done is rebuild the dock and redo the bulkhead that is below the dock. We want to dredge a channel because we know it can get shallow in that area. We had some people pull up by boat this weekend, but I kind of say you're doing it at your own risk, because there's a little bit of riprap, some concrete stuff that was old bulkhead, if you will. And then there's some stumps out in certain areas that in winter low tides, you can see those stumps, but no other time of the year can you see them. And I don't want anybody's hull to be damaged as a result of, just hope for the best. But we plan to dredge a channel, mark that channel, put 2 little finger piers off of our deck, and have at least parking for up to 8 boats. Now, if boats want to tie up to each other, we'll be able to handle more. But that's kind of our mission, and we want to try to get that done before the summer.
Wow, that's awesome. That's awesome to be able to do that. So as you sort of look at where you are, how the relatively soft opening as you zoom toward offering dinner, it's got to be. Do you sit back and watch people as they coming in and say, "God dang, man, we're actually here after all this work. We're actually here."
Oh, that feeling is yes. Every time I walk in there now, and it doesn't feel like mine. I don't feel like the Blowfly is. It's not. It's the communities. I'm just helping kind of steward this thing back to what it was, and then these qualified people that our operations director Kelly Police and our chefs and the kitchen staff and the wait staff. They're the ones that are really going to bring the Blowfly back. All I did was set the stage, and that's the beauty of it. And they're doing a fantastic job. So me walking in there, I'm blown away by seeing this flurry of activity and people praising me and stuff. But all I did was kind of be an interior decorator and an investor. And I'm just so happy to get to be a part of it, really. it's amazing.
When you look back, as you're sort of growing up in the car dealership, you know, it was probably in your mind that one day you'll start to diversify what you do. But did you ever imagine you'd be in the restaurant business?
No, not specifically. I when I first approached this, it was really about real estate, and I like to, and I've got a good solid group of people that are contractor friends, and that could approach that job with me and make me feel comfortable doing it. But Triple Tails in Bay St. Louis, you know, I play the drums, not actively all the time, but I can play the drums, and I like music, I always have. So it started with live music venue style feel, and then Triple Tails also served food, which familiarized me with it. But believe me, I've heard the nightmares about, you know, get out of food and beverage before you can, you know. But you know, the Blowfly has just such a different feel for it to me than Triple Tails. They're night and day type places. But the Blowfly is it's going to become this thing that's going to stand on its own. It's not going to be me. It's going to be an entity bigger than any one person. I think that's what it already is.
Well, that's why what I said a few minutes ago, that sometimes things that are worth having are not easy. But at the end of the day, business leaders often, I mean, really at the end of the day, brand is about the emotional connection someone has with your product. So when you think of the Blowfly Inn, for people who sort of knew that brand before, and the brand that as you introduce it to new people, you want them to have an emotional connection. You want it to stand through generations, and maybe that's where you're headed. I think that is where you're headed. Hey, listen, we're out of time, but Jonathan, congratulations on opening. We'll stay in touch with you and look forward to chatting in the future.
Thanks, Ricky. I'd be happy to come back anytime.
It's been great. This has been Jonathan Allen from the Blowfly Inn. We'll see you after this.